Just, just to give you a little bit of background on myself, I come from the world of church facilities. I've been there my entire adult career, spent the first 25 years building physical facilities across the country. And the last 12 or so years have spent it in helping churches best steward what they've been entrusted. That's why we've got this first slide up here called Entrusted. It's also the name of the book that Lynn referenced, that she read. It's just something that I'm very passionate about. And so we're going to dive in here. For those of you who are accustomed to using Zoom, if you want to raise your hand, you can, or put something in the chat. I will try to get to it. I will definitely open up at the end for some question and answer. Although, Lynn, I think you told me I had to be done by 10 o'clock tonight. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay,
well,
good. Well,
Tim, bad news. The vet's going to kick me out at 7. So.
Okay, well, I guarantee you it'll be done by 10 because I will be in bed long before then. Being a man of the age that I am, I need my beauty sleep and everything that I can get. So let's go ahead and jump in here. So about 13, 14 years ago, we started using the term church facility stewardship. The EPA started using the term environmental stewardship. There's a number of other things that stewardship represents. I grew up in a pastor's home, which may make me just a little bit weird, and so please forgive me for that. But growing up, the word stewardship always meant we needed to raise money. But really, stewardship is taking care of somebody else's things. And so whether it's environmental stewardship, whether it's stewarding people or the Word of God or our church facilities, it's taking care of somebody else's stuff. So when we think of facility stewardship, let's drill down kind of into what those meanings may be. Facility, pretty simple. It's something that is built, installed, or established to serve a particular purpose. In the case of what we're going to talk about is church facility stewardship. So we're talking about the buildings that we worship in, that we use for ministry and education and reaching our communities. The next is stewardship, which is the careful and responsible management of something entrusted to one's care. One of the primary biblical parables is always the story of the talents, and they stewarded those talents appropriately. And so I'm a firm believer that everything on earth belongs to God. And as such, if we believe that God has entrusted to us the stewarding of everything on earth, then we're basically stewarding God's stuff. And I believe there's a responsibility that goes with that in everything that we do. And our worship facilities are not an exception to that rule. They are part of that. Now, speaking to church people, I've got to get all biblical on you for a minute. And if we refer back to Numbers 3, verses 14 through 38, the original facility managers were the holy men at the time. They were the Levites, okay? It wasn't the lower echelon of the Israelite people. It was the high priests. If we read in verse 38, Moses and Aaron and his sons were to camp to the east of the tabernacle, toward the sunrise, in front of the tent of meeting. They were responsible for the care of the sanctuary on behalf of the Israelites. So long before there were youth pastors and other people that you may have on your current staffs at your parish, there were facility managers. And again, they were the high priest were responsible for this. And unfortunately, we've allowed that through cultural change to shift to where we now think in terms of, oh, it's the lowest person on the staffing totem pole that's now in charge of different things. Um, so thanks, Charles. That was funny. Let me go back here. So when we think about our roles and to think about the roles of the people on your staff, one of the reasons I am so dogmatic about this is we think about the facilities that we've been entrusted with, and they are not just a house. Well, we refer to it as the house of God, but it's not a house. Our church facilities are complex commercial structures. They take a different level of care than your homes do. And so how do we take it seriously? What's our responsibility in all of this? So when I refer to facility stewardship, there's 4 basic components. The first one is design. And my guess is most of you already have facilities. So design is not going to be very applicable at this point in time for you. But when you design a church facility, you need to think about how's this facility going to serve us as we serve our community and our congregation. The second component of facility stewardship is utilization. Candidly, if you're not going to use your building, then why have a building? Go rent a tent, stick it up in a parking lot somewhere and call that church. So if we're not utilizing it the way that we believe God wanted us to, which is why we built the building in the first place, then what's the point? The third is maintenance and management of the facility. And the fourth one is, how do we sustain it? How do we care for that facility so it is ready for the next generation as well? Now, for tonight's discussion, anything related to design and utilization, we'll save for another day. Again, my guess is does anybody have a brand new facility or anybody getting ready to plan a brand new facility? Yeah, my guess is everybody's got an existing one. You're learning to do ministry the way your building tells you to. It was Winston Churchill that said, "We shape our buildings and thereafter they shape us." And that is so true with our church buildings. I mean, think about how many of I can't see some of you, but for those I can see, how many of you have a building that's more than 30 years old? More than 50 years old? More than 100 years old? More than a gazillion years old? Okay, Cheryl, I had to get you at some point. You think about this. Those buildings were built at a time and in a way that best facilitated worship and ministry the way they did it at that period of time. Now we're finding ourselves having to look at those buildings, many of them ornate and gorgeous architectural buildings, and say, but maybe we don't do ministry that way today. So how do we accommodate ministry the way we want to going forward? Again, like I said, the design and utilization we'll save for another day. Lynn, maybe we'll come back and talk about that some other time. Because there are things that we need to be constantly looking at. Let me give you a prime example. Who makes the best chicken sandwiches in the world? Okay. It's Chick-fil-A. Okay. I'm from the South, I have to say that. I live less than 2 miles away from what was the highest grossing Chick-fil-A in all of North Carolina. It was a 20-year-old building. Man, they were knocking out of the park. One day I drove by and they had torn the building down. I'm thinking to myself, what are they doing? This is the most profitable Chick-fil-A. And within about 6 months, they had rebuilt the Chick-fil-A. And I asked the operator who I knew, and he said, well, it didn't have a double drive-through. The kitchen was the outdated version of how we did things. And the serving lines were different, and so on and so on. So many other institutions in America and around the world build their buildings with the intent of it fitting a certain period of time, and then they do something different with the buildings in order for it to accommodate how they do business, worship, whatever, today. That's a little harder for us to bite off when you know that our worship facilities were built on the shoulders of other people that gave sacrificially for years to think, oh, well, we don't need it that way anymore. We'll just tear it down. It just doesn't quite work. So let's dig into maintenance and management. So looking at what is maintenance. So maintenance is the art of maintaining, state of being maintained, upkeep, and so on. It's basically keeping things running. You have a spill on aisle 5 because the toilet has overflown. Someone needs to go and fix that commode, and you need to repair it. You need to touch up the paint. You need to recaulk your windows. Management, on the other side, is the act or manner of managing something. You have skills, you have executive ability, you're in control of something. So which one's more important, maintenance or management? Well, to me, it's a both and. In most cases, your management is your proactive side. You're reviewing contacts, you're reviewing bills, you're looking for ways to reduce spending, you're looking for ways to extend the life of your HVAC systems. Maintenance, on the other hand, is generally reactive. Something's broken, it needs fixed. Something's dirty, it needs cleaned. I would contend that it's a both and, not an either or. And in fact, Lynn, do you have a sense of how many of the folks here are parish administrators?
From the list, I think we have a fair number of clergy in the room. We have a couple of people who were on vestry, so in the leadership team, the governing board, and the rest I can't tell you, Tim, but
okay.
A good number of clergy and a good number of vestry members.
But what ends up happening, because we need both management and maintenance, is too often churches will hire a person and they'll give them the title of facility manager, which is great, but what they truly are is generally a facility maintenance person. They carry a tool belt, they carry a broom, they repair things throughout the day. And the management side of what is necessary here gets done by the rector, the priest. It's done by a vestry member or your business administrator. And so both are going to happen. They have to happen. The question is it being done by the same person or two different people? And how are we reconciling who's doing it? Because my guess is, Grant, I'm going to assume that you're a clergy. And so you probably didn't go to seminary to learn how to fix a toilet or to plan a facilities budget. Now, maybe you did, and so take that for what it's worth, but I had to pick on somebody. But that's just the case. When I work with other denominations, they many times will have a business administrator. Well, that business administrator ends up being the ad hoc facility manager, and then they have facility maintenance people and custodians underneath of them. But I assure you, both roles are critically important. But if the proactive side of management is being done by somebody who has 101 other things on their plate already, and it's not their specialization, it is often something that gets overlooked or isn't given the attention that is needed to do things. So let's look at different kinds of maintenance. So the very first type of maintenance is what's considered corrective maintenance. This might be called break fix, or something breaks and you got to repair it. There really is no escaping this. Light bulbs all have to be replaced. Air conditioning filters have to be replaced. Things will break over time. There's no way to totally eliminate it, but there are ways to mitigate it by being proactive in how we address different things from a maintenance perspective. The next kind of maintenance is predictive maintenance. Now, this is only now getting some legs in the church market. It is very popular in secular markets, office buildings, warehouses, industrial facilities, where you actually have sensoring systems that will let you know when something's getting ready to go wrong. Maybe there's vibration in your air conditioning unit and it lets you know, hey, you've got a problem. Someone needs to go check on it. This is going to become more commonplace in churches because what we have found is churches can't and don't hire enough people to take care of the building the way it needs to. And in light of that, we're going to find new ways to help augment the fact that we don't have the necessary staff to care for a building. Right now, there's an organization called IFMA, International Facility Managers Association. It is the world's leading source of facility management information. They're not church-centric, they're facility management-centric. Between their research and our own benchmarking research, the best run facilities have one full-time maintenance person for every 35,000 square feet. So you can do the math real quick in your mind. If you know how many square feet you have in your facility, and then do you have one full-time maintenance person for every 35,000 square feet? What we find is most churches don't. Most churches are significantly higher, 1 to 50, 1 to 75,000. And in light of that, we know also that churches aren't going to stop their ministries, nor should they, in order to hire more staff. So what we're seeing a move towards is how do we use technology to fill in the gaps of not being able to have the additional staff. Now, the third type of maintenance is one that you're probably more familiar with, and it's preventative maintenance. So my guess is most of you have some kind of a routine for changing your air conditioning filters. That is a form of preventive maintenance. But there are dozens and dozens and dozens of things that need preventive maintenance. Some of it may seem really simple, like changing the batteries in your smoke detectors so they don't go beeping in the middle of the sermon. There's all sorts of things. And the reality is preventive maintenance is much cheaper than replacement and repair maintenance. It is much cheaper to have a scheduled routine maintenance plan than to wait till something breaks. My guess is many of you on this call will remember the old Fram filter, oil filter commercial. Pay me now or pay me later. You can spend that in today's dollars, $30, $40 for an oil change and filter, or you can pay $4,000 to $5,000 for a new engine because you didn't change the oil. Which one costs more? Obviously, it's the replacement and the full repair. So we need to be more intentional about doing the preventive maintenance things so that we avoid or at least mitigate some of the catastrophic things that can shut down a facility for a period of time. So what are some of the most common preventive maintenance items? HVAC is one of the most common that people think about, changing the filters. If we were in a room together, I would ask how many of you do it quarterly, semi-annually, monthly. I have an employee who used to be the facility manager at a large church in Dallas, Texas, that he used to change his every month. And he'd buy the cheap Lowe's and Home Depot filters. And I said, why do you do that every month when you could buy a better filter? He goes, because if I do it every month, it forces me and my staff to actually touch every air conditioning unit every month. And I'm not just changing the filters, I'm checking the belts, I'm listening for things that don't sound right. And it just forces us to be more hands-on with our HVAC equipment. Elevators, if you have a facility that has an elevator, your fire extinguishers it's more than just getting your inspections done. There are things that you can do with fire extinguishers that are considered preventive maintenance, such as taking a fire extinguisher, turning it upside down, shake it a little bit, turn it right side up, and all the chemicals now remix. Because what happens over time, it sits in a cabinet or on your wall, and all of the fire suppression sinks to the bottom of that canister. Well, if you go around once a month to check it anyway, just turn it upside down, let all the chemicals get ignited with each other, and then put it back up. If you have commercial kitchen hoods, you need to have those checked and the grease filters changed on a regular basis. Water heaters have a preventive maintenance schedule when you should drain them and check the bottom pans. All of you probably will have a backflow preventer to your facility. Once a year, that should be checked. Plumbing actually has preventive maintenance type things. You should probably every 6 months change or clean out the aerators on all of your sinks. It's a really simple item. You unscrew it, get the dirt out of it, put it back on. Check to make sure that your toilets aren't running. There's numbers of things that need to be done there. Parking lot material has preventive maintenance type things. Your striping and making sure that your parking stops are properly mounted. If you have fire suppression systems like a sprinkler system, they have regular routine things. Your batteries, whether it's an AED, nothing's worse than if your church has someone that has a heart incident and somebody from the vestry runs and grabs the AED, which I hope you have, in your building, and they get it out and they go to slap those paddles on them and there's no juice in it. Not only is that tragic, but the church would be liable for having a medical device that wasn't properly functional. And so you now open yourself up to liable issues and issues that could impact insurance. Our team does facility condition assessments across the country. Matter of fact, I was sharing with Lynn, we just did an engagement for the Southern Ohio Episcopal Diocese where we did all their parishes for them. And I can tell you the two of the things that we find over and over again in them is AEDs whose batteries are expired and first aid kits that has medicine that is 3, 4, 10 years old in it. We don't check those things. Those are things that have preventive maintenance to it. Preventive maintenance doesn't necessarily mean you have to turn a wrench to do it. It just means there's attention that needs to be given to it. If you have auto flush sinks or commodes or urinals, you need to check the batteries on those on a regular basis. Automatic doors, if you have automatic doors because you have handicap accessibility and you've got that button on the outside, they need lubricated on a regular basis. Door closures need lubricated and adjustments on a regular basis. Your electrical panels and circuits should be checked on a regular basis to make sure that you don't have overheating circuits. Because what happens if you have a circuit that is constantly being overheated? It's a fire hazard. Your light bulbs are a preventive maintenance type thing. And I'm a big fan of mass relamping. One of the hardest things to relamp is a sanctuary because you generally have pews, which are hard to move, and the lights are 20, 30 or more feet high in the air. And so my suggestion with relamping is do it all at one time. For example, find a light bulb and determine, okay, it's 8,000 hours, 10,000 hour bulbs. Plan to replace all of them at one time. Don't do one here, one there, because you're generally having to rent a lift or hire an electrician to go do all these things. Do them all at one time. And if it says it's a 10,000 hour bulb, just assume the manufacturer's lying, because they all do, and reduce it by 20 or 25%. And then calculate how many hours a week do we use our worship center? If you use it 3 hours a week, oh great. How many years is that out to reach that modified number of hours and then just replace them all again at that time? Because for first-time guests, when they walk into your facility and you've got 20% of your light bulbs out, it looks like either you don't care about the building or you can't afford to take care of it. And so the condition of your building will say things to other people. I already mentioned the aerators. Your security and alarm systems need to be tested on a regular basis. Window and door caulk needs to be done on a regular basis. If you go to Home Depot or Lowe's and you look at a tube of caulk and you look at the warranty of that caulk, generally it is 1 year. So how often should you be recaulking your windows and doors? More frequently than you do, I'm sure. Because let me ask you this, when it rains outside and you get your caulk that's starting to crack and peel and pull away from the window, where does the water go? Right into the wall. And you may not know it for a number of years until you start smelling something on the inside or seeing a little bit of growth coming through the drywall or the plaster. Roofing and drains and gutters need to be cleaned and adjusted on a regular basis. Yes, Lynn, yes, pest inspections needs to be done on a regular basis. And it's a combination of both pest and rodent. And so your typical spraying for pests and whatnot is something that needs to be done, but then also any rodent, particularly if you're in an aged building that maybe has a boiler in the basement, and that basement is not truly occupiable space. Those are primary areas for that. Even your landscaping needs preventive maintenance. Your utility connections from the power company and from your water and sewer company, all that needs to be looked at on a regular basis. And there is so much more. We've got, if you go to our website, smartchurchsolutions.com, under resources, we have a preventive maintenance checklist that is a free download. That, again, is probably not even exhaustive, but it's a whole lot more exhaustive than what I've just shared here. So at the very least, that would be a good starting point, and it's totally free of charge. So John Wooden, the famed coach, UCLA Bruins, great quote: "If you don't have time to do it right, when will you have time to do it over?" And too often, when it comes to caring for our buildings, we just don't have the time to get it done right, or we don't have the money to get it done right. Well, not getting it done right is going to turn into something that's even worse than anything we've talked about. And it's called deferred maintenance. So deferred maintenance is it is the killer of a number of churches. We've done a lot of work in the DC area with a number of churches. And unfortunately, particularly during COVID, we were the bearer of really bad news for many of them, to where they couldn't keep up with just the maintenance of the building anymore, to where we had to make recommendation they do something different with the building. Sell it, tear it down, do something else with the building because they just couldn't take it anymore. So deferred maintenance is a significant thing. So what is deferred maintenance? It's basically stuff that should have been done that we haven't done yet. It's that oil filter that instead of doing it every 5,000 miles, you've put it off for 30 or 40,000 miles. You're deferring things because there's either not money or time or a number of different things. The problem with deferred maintenance is it grows upon itself. It will continually get worse and worse and worse. There were two research studies done, one by the National Educators Association, NEA, and another one by another green group that we were able to find. The first one said that if a necessary repair is deferred and allowed to remain in service until the next level of failure, the resultant expense will be 30 times the early intervention. So let me go back to my window example here. So a tube of caulk will cost you $4 to $5. And to caulk all your windows, or let's say just one window, you can caulk one window in probably less than 30 minutes, unless it's a really big window. Well, if you don't do that, and you start, or you do it, but then a year or two later, you start seeing it to crack or peel off, and you do nothing about it, The next point of failure on that window is likely going to be that black stuff that starts growing through the drywall on the inside. Well, at that point in time, if moisture's gotten into the wall, it's probably started to deteriorate the wood sills on the outside as well, if you have wood sills. But now I probably have wet insulation. I've got studs that may be deteriorating. I have drywall that may likely be wet, and I may have drywall that has mold on it. So we've gone from a $4 or $5 item and a 30-minute time frame to something that could cost 30 times even more to now fix. So this is where understanding stewardship, and it's better to take care of those things as you go than waiting until the next catastrophic. The other study said that for every $1 of deferred maintenance, it'll take you $4 of capital renewals in the future. So 400% more than taking care of that item at its first notice of deferred maintenance. All of these pictures that you're really enjoying right now are pictures of assessments that we have done on actual church buildings. These are not Google pictures. These are real churches. So my favorite one is the top middle one. This is a church that in their infinite wisdom bought a mall. Not real smart, frankly. And because they didn't need all the air conditioning units, they just decided to roof over them. When they re-roofed the building, they just put the membrane right over the roof. I mean, right over the air conditioning units. But here's a really simple kind of example. That bottom right-hand picture. You've got a gutter, you've got a sidewalk, you've got a column and grassed area. Well, kind of grass. What happens if that continues like that? Well, the first thing is it's going to continue to erode the dirt. And at some point in time, it's going to create pathways for that water to get under the sidewalk, possibly get under that column, at which time you may have deterioration of both the column and the concrete. Those are serious 30 times 400% increase type items versus $10 or $15 of black pipe to stick on the end of that thing and get it away from any concrete. These are the things that we overlook constantly. So here's some free consulting advice. Get somebody from a different parish to come to your church and do a walkthrough for you. And ask them to be really, really critical of everything that they see. To have a set of fresh eyes looking at your facility can be priceless. So our team has done a little over 20 million square feet of church facilities in assessments. So we have found that there's a fun fact that no one actually wants to hear related to all the facilities that we have inspected. On average, they have $25 to $40 per square foot of deferred maintenance. So let's say you've got a 30,000 square foot building. That means you're probably somewhere in 750 to $1.2 million in deferred maintenance. That's not including what it takes to keep your building operational. That's just what you're behind on and what's deteriorating. So then the question becomes, how are you going to address that? Because the rate of deterioration becomes exponential over time. Wood rot rots faster than the initial starting of wood rot. So what do we do with this kind of information? So we did a report for a magazine a number of years ago who asked us, what is the cost of owning a building? Not the cost of building a building. Cost of building a building is easy. Cost of owning a building. Well, when we looked at it, over a 40-year period of time, over 71% of the money invested in the building was an operational cost. Keeping the lights on, doing maintenance, repairs, utilities, janitorial, capital reserves, and so on. That's a big number. And too often people get all excited about the new shiny thing, and they forget, no, we got to take care of this thing for the next 50 to 100 years. And it's going to cost a lot of money, and it's going to continue to grow in cost year over year with inflation and deterioration. So I've kind of hit on the maintenance and management side of things. So let's talk for a minute about the sustaining part of things. And when I think of sustaining a building, I'm thinking about having to face the inevitable. Life cycle planning is not a if question. It's not, will we replace every air conditioning unit? It's a matter of when and how much. These are inevitable things. All natural resources deteriorate over time, period. All man-made devices deteriorate over time. Every bit of your roof will be replaced at some point in time. Now, some of you may be blessed with slate, which means you may get 60, 70 years out of that roof. Then it's going to cost you both legs and one arm to replace it, because it's ghastly expensive in today's economy. It's because the quality workers to do slate isn't what it used to be. So you will replace every stitch of carpet over a period of time. It's just going to happen. And yet we don't look at it that way. We don't plan for that inevitability. We just assume, oh, it's going to be fine, and when it breaks, we'll raise money to take care of it. Well, let's look at this a little closer. There's three facts I want us to make sure we grasp. The first, all buildings deteriorate at an annual rate of 1% to 4%. This is not Tim's words. This is from International Facility Managers Association, that says all buildings, not all church buildings, all buildings, hospitals, shopping centers, everything, deteriorate at a rate of 1% to 4% a year. So just to keep up with the natural rate of deterioration, you need to look at what is the value of your building today, and know that it's going to take you 1% to 4% of that value just to keep at ground zero, because the building's deteriorating. And if you miss keeping up with it, it will more than double over the next several years. The next fact is that as such, nearly every physical component of your facility will be replaced or have a major overhaul. You may not replace the footings, you may not replace the structural steel or the wood arches, but nearly everything else over time will be replaced or have significant retrofits to it. And because of that, all of the above requires dollars. I'm yet to find a roofer in 2025 that will exchange new roofing material for some goats and sheep. Okay? It's just not happening. It requires dollars. And when you look at the life cycle of a building, you have this planning, you have construction, commissioning, and facility management. It is part of the whole life cycle here. And we have to be planning for it appropriately, because it is going to happen. It is an inevitability. I feel like I'm Morpheus on the Matrix. It's inevitable. I'm going to go back one slide here. So when I think in terms of that life cycle, think about this. How many of you put money in a 401k or whatever your IRA, whatever your retirement vehicle is, with the intent you're going to spend it next week? Does anybody do that? Probably not. I know when I started my financial retirement planning, I started looking down the road to say, how much money do I think I'm going to need in X number of years? And what happens if I put a certain amount of money into an account that hopefully will grow over time? Will I get to that point? That's how I recommend churches approach capital reserves is to think through on a case-by-case line item basis. This air conditioning unit cost us $10,000 this year. It's projected to last 15 years. So 15 years, $10,000 over 15 years with an inflation rate of 3, 4, 5, 6%, whatever to get there. That's how much money you're going to need in 15 years. So take that, divide it by 15, and that's how much money you should be setting aside every year for that piece of equipment, so that when you get there, you're not having to go back and do a special offering or a capital campaign to raise those funds. Because again, this is inevitable. That brand new air conditioning unit this year will fail and have to be replaced in 15 to 18 years. So what are we doing to plan for the inevitable? So I like to think of a capital reserve account as kind of a retirement account for your facility. We don't necessarily always retire our facility, but we do retire most of the components in our facility. And when we retire them, we put a new one in its place, and it starts a new retirement cycle. So don't think that the buildings are just going to last forever and that every component is going to last forever. We need to be proactive, and we need to be thinking about what is the inevitability of all those type of things. So how we started tonight was Lynn was sharing how she and I met, and she found my book Entrusted. I think she actually found my study guide first and then bought the book Entrusted. So she went a little backwards on it. But I truly believe that we have got to be better stewards of what God has entrusted to us, and we've got to steward them accordingly. So as I'm wrapping things up here, and I will open up for questions, Lynn, is we do have a Facebook group. If anybody is interested, we've got about 2,700 people that are part of it that share questions and comments and help each other out with things. When we first started it, I thought I was going to have to answer every question, and now I don't answer any questions because we have such a great group of facility stewards across the country that are involved in all of that. So I will open up for question and answer. I'll also put my email up there. If anyone has questions, you're welcome to email me directly, and if I can help, I will, or point you in the right direction.
You know, Tim, as you're talking, I'm thinking, so we have a Canterbury Center, a college chaplaincy center, and we've done some major work in that facility. And everything you're talking about, I'm kind of going through the list of, yep, a lot of it could have been prevented, right? With some preventative maintenance, but it was a major overhaul. Including, I mentioned about the pest thing, but the fireplace. I know some of our churches have fireplaces. Just the importance of having those chimney inspections, hugely important. You know, and I think we don't think about it because it maybe doesn't get used very often.
Sure, and with the center that you mentioned, Lynn, you know, you've spent all this money and time getting it brought back to health. So then the next question is, what are we doing to prepare for the next time we have to do that?
Yep.
It's going to happen again.
Yep.
You know, probably not in you and I's lifetime, but it's going to happen. So how do we prepare the next generation or 2 generations from now with having thought through? It's kind of that old, what was it? The King of England, when he built one of the cathedrals with oak. And people said, well, what are we going to do when we need more oak? Well, he planted an oak forest that, you know, it was going to take 100 years to grow. That's a form of capital stewardship. You're planning for the future so that the next generation doesn't have that weight on their shoulder to have to take care of it.
So Tim, one of the challenges, you know, there certainly are some churches who are incredibly well resourced, right? And then there's what I think is happening more and more is that churches are smaller, resources are not as robust as they once were. Any advice on how some of those maybe smaller churches begin to do this work? Because my guess is you can't jump in all at once, right? You have to begin a thoughtful process. But
Yeah, so there, I'll give you a couple of rules of thumb. So on average, uh, to pay for utilities, what should be general maintenance and custodial work, somewhere between $5 and $5.50 a square foot is a good range for churches to be in. Capital reserves are somewhere around $3 a square foot annually and every year. If you don't have a capital reserve fund now, or your church doesn't have an endowment for capital reserves, I did an assessment for Christ Church Cathedral in Indianapolis. It's Eli Lilly's home church. They had a really nice endowment, like $74 million. Anyway, not everybody has that. If you don't have a capital reserve fund now, and you can't afford $3 a square foot, start with something. 25 cents a square foot, or do a quick assessment and say, what's the oldest air conditioning units we have right now? Or how old is the roof? So the big three, as far as expenses for churches, is roof, your HVAC, and your parking lots. Those are three of the biggest expenditures. Now, for many of you, you may also have stained glass. You may also have pipe organs. Those also are big expenditures. But for most churches, HVAC, roofing, and parking. If nothing else, start with those three and say, what is our life expectancy of those items? And what do we need to start saving now to mitigate what those big expenses could be down the road? If I were going to add a fourth one to that, Lynn, it would be your interior flooring, because flooring, carpet particularly, takes a huge beating, and particularly if you're in any kind of a snow area. So I would start small, either as a percent of what the needed amount is, or go to those big three and try to evaluate what are the best use of funds. If you're a small congregation and you only have 3 air conditioning units, what's the oldest one? Let's tackle it and start saving enough money that we can replace it when it's needed.
thanks, Tim. What other questions do the rest of you have?
I have a question, Tim. Thanks so much for your talk. I really learned a lot. I'm new to the vestry. I've been the senior or new to being a senior warden. I've been a senior warden 2 months. And I've learned during that time that most of the job is about this topic. So that's why I'm on the call. I found out that we have a water issue. The building is old. The water is seeping up from the ground and down from the parking lot, coming into the building. There are puddles, there are mold and mildew issues, but the cost is like scary to fix. So I'm just, it's because it's not been dealt with. It's been known for years though. So I'm just wondering how you've seen churches tell the patient that they're that it's a major illness.
Yeah, you're on life support, and
yes. How do you do that?
well, there's no easy way to do it. The same way it's never easy for a doctor to tell a family that you have a family member with a terminal disease. And I'm not telling you, Cheryl, that your situation is terminal. So, but it's critical for sure.
Yeah.
And so I think the very best thing for a senior warden and a vestry is just be as honest as you can and not cast blame for the past. This has been a problem. It's been a problem for years, but now we have to do something about it.
Right.
And so here's what the solutions are. But if we don't do this, we'll be going to the shopping center down the street to have worship.
Okay.
And so it's got to be put into okay, doctor tells me, Tim, you've got a heart problem and we can take care of it. But if you ignore it, you're going to die in a month. Okay, I'm probably going to be making a change.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I would recommend, Cheryl, is anything that you can do to break up the fix in bite-sized pieces.
Okay.
What could we do right now that would stop the water? Then what would be the next thing to mitigate what has been done? Then what do we need to do to reclaim it back to its rightful condition?
Got
And
it.
so at the very least, you need to stop what's going on,
Yeah. Yeah.
even if
yeah.
you don't fix what's there.
Yeah.
So I would approach it both in the, if we don't do this, this is what's going to happen. And we've got this bid of, $200,000, but 50 of it we've got to do right now.
Okay.
And then next year we can do this and, that kind of thing. As long as by breaking it up like that, you're not cutting off your nose to spite your face.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if the whole thing done at one time is 200,000, but you break it up in pieces and now it costs you $400,000, that's not real good stewardship either.
Right. Got it. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions that you might have for Tim? I will tell you that we do have a copy of his book in the diocesan library. So if it's something that you want to borrow to read through, just shoot me a message, an email or a text, either one. I'll put my information in the chat, and I'm happy to.
It's kind of funny, Lynn. I've got two of my staff members that are out in Kansas City this week at the EPN conference, the Episcopal Parish Network conference.
Uh-huh. Yeah. No, there's lots of folks out there. That's my email. Should you want to borrow the book? Tim, I think about a couple years ago, my church, I worship at a church in Norfolk, Virginia, and we had a hailstorm, which, for other folk, it was just a hailstorm and they might have had a little damage. We had catastrophic roof damage that shut the place down for months, shut our day school down, shut our, and it happened at the same time as another heating, an HVAC issue, right? But the question had to be, for this catastrophic failure to happen, that there was probably some way to know that there was something up with the roof, right? And so as you were talking, I just kept thinking about, gosh, that would have been preferable to the massive insurance payout. Luckily, insurance covered it, but the massive insurance payout to virtually redo everything.
Yeah. And because of instances like that, the insurance companies are really cracking down on old roofs.
Mm.
Matter of fact, if you have a roof that's more than 20 years old, they are not doing replacement value anymore. They're only doing actual cost. And so you might have a 20-year-old, 25-year-old roof, and it costs $50,000 to replace, but the actual value of that roof, of what's left of it's only $5,000. They're only going to give you $5,000 of that $50,000.
Wow.
And we've got dozens and dozens of churches that have called us about what they need to do, and they want to have their roofs inspected because they want to know, are they getting ready to put themselves in a liability situation, and how much money do they need to have for a deductible to cover that in the case of a catastrophic issue. And my recommendation is put a new roof on it, start that 20-year cycle all over again, and get full coverage.
So do you recommend getting rid of the slate roof?
No, no, I would keep the slate roof all day long. Now, when I'm talking about the roofs, Cheryl, generally we're talking about shingles and membrane roof and things like that. They'll look at your slate roofs differently.
Okay.
Any other questions before we let Tim go and enjoy the rest of his evening? We really appreciate that y'all came out tonight. Thanks, Charles, for being here. Anybody else for the questions for the good of the order? Any last minute ones? Let's see, there's something in the chat. Let's see what that is. Okay. Tim, you're getting some kudos from Charles for your good advice. All right,
Thank you all for inviting me.
And Tim, if I know you put you put the slide up with your contact information. So if can people just reach out and ask a question, or I mean, I know your company, that's what it does, but is there a problem with them reaching out to you?
No, they're welcome to reach out, and I'll try to give whatever advice I can.
Okay, and then you mentioned the Facebook page is helpful place to chat with others who are looking at the same issues. So,
Yeah,
well, friends,
exactly.
I will wish you all a good evening. On behalf of the Creation Care team, we appreciate you coming out. When we think about creation care, right, it's an appreciation of what's around us, an appreciation of the things that we are stewarding, right? So, Tim, we're really thankful that you were willing to chat with us tonight, and some great information. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you, Lynn.
All right. Peace, everyone.